Speaking of it live from Studio West. I fled the East and we are in the middle of a torrential downpour. That's what happens. Bret Baier is still inside the Beltway and bringing us up to date on what he has heard overnight about the battle to become Speaker by Kevin McCarthy. Good morning, Bret. Thank you for hosting me last night. What have you heard overnight?
Hearing progress for the McCarthy camp and hearing that they're at about peeling, 10 off. Whether they vote present or not is interesting, because you've got to do the math. It's once you start getting people voting present, then as you know, the overall number goes down. The magic number that you have to hit goes down. But Hakeem Jeffries is obviously hitting 212 each time, so they've got to figure out how to get McCarthy to 213. But bottom line, as I heard overnight and this morning, progress from the McCarthy folks.
Now, Bret, I love this story coming up because it means I don't have to talk about Georgia football with you. But I want to recognize this son of Georgia, this Marist High School graduate, is being very kind. He has not taunted me, even though I have Buckeye Brutus behind me on my bookshelf. Bret, let me play a little bit of what Jim Banks told your colleagues on Fox and Friends this morning. Cut number 2 of Jim Banks.
Well, we're going to have another vote at noon, and I think you're going to see some progress. I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. So if that happens, hopefully that progress snowballs. And members who are holding out feel pressure in their districts or from others to unify with the party and do the right thing and elect a speaker so that we can work on the issues that matters. I think at noon,
Stop there. So, Bret, it looks like it's not blinking. I think the smart guy, Chip Roy, got some concessions on Rules Committee. So now there's a bridge off the island. If you stay on the island, what do you think is going to happen to the 10 or so who stay on the island and the mutiny continues?
Well, I think there'll be pressure building from, listen, they're going to have diehards at their base saying, you go, you're fighting for us. But when it diminishes and the number is 8 to 10, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure from home. Hey, we got to get going here. We look bad, and you got to get moving to actually doing things that you promised us we would do. I think, it's a double-edged sword, Hugh, as we talked about last night. McCarthy is giving up the ranch here. And when you get to that point with these folks who have demonstrated their ability to stand up and throw things into the wheel and stop the motion, they're going to be given key committee positions and rules committee positions. And the question is whether that takes away his ability to really legislate.
There are 2 members with whom I don't think any common cause will be made, Matt Gaetz and Bob Good. And those 2 are just in a world by themselves. Everybody else at some time in their life has been a realistic person. Andy Biggs ran the Arizona Senate, for goodness sakes. He knows what it's like. So I am curious, how long will this story linger and how much damage do you think it's done to the Republican agenda?
I think they will bounce back. They'll start doing things that Republicans want to see. But remember, with slim majorities, they're just not going to have a lot of success, and obviously with the Democratic Senate. I think what has happened in a way is good in that you bring up the question of spending and how Washington works. What has been bad is that by doing that, they've tarred Kevin McCarthy and even by extension Donald Trump, saying that they're part of the swamp, which was really quite something to watch.
Yeah, Victoria Spartz, Congresswoman from Indiana, was thinking about challenging Jim Banks, whose clips we've been playing. And Jim Banks is the prohibitive front runner, and she decided to vote present after Donald Trump urged everyone to get behind. I don't understand what possible advantage other than, and you were kind enough not to mention this last night because we can't read people's mind, but some members of Congress want to become you, Bret, or they want to become me. They want to become on the radio or they want to be on the television. I don't think this is a good strategy to advance that sort of a career. Do you?
I don't think so. But listen, it worked for Kinzinger on CNN. So
it did. That was CNN officially declaring that they're out of the running for the GOP debates. That was my reaction. Oh, they don't want the debates. Because
yeah, exactly.
It's just kind of, So let's move forward and talk a little bit about McCarthy. Obviously dinged up, but people have been dinged up before, and McCarthy is resilient. You've spent a lot of time with him. I've spent a lot of time with him. He's also not said an angry word in public, to my knowledge. Am I wrong about that?
I don't think so. I haven't seen it. I know in private it's reported that he's been quite angry and vocal and loud. But I agree with you. In public, it's another thing. And I also agree with you. He's been dinged up before. I mean, remember 2015, and he's pretty resilient. Again, the question is, with this public display, how much is he going to be able to herd the cats? And I don't think it's going to be pretty. The process on the Republican side in the House, but it's also going to be, a stalemate. They're not going to be able to get a lot done unless they fully negotiate with Democrats, and maybe that's something he's willing to do.
First thing he does, I think, is dispatch Jordan and Judiciary to the border, and Mike Gallagher stands up the China Committee, and the oversight gets going. But I also think he holds some big fundraisers and amasses a war chest. And everybody notices. I mean, the speaker raises money, Brett. You're the Speaker of the House of Representatives. That to me is the way he bounces back quickly, is by filling up the gas tank.
I agree. I agree with that. I do think that there's some exhaustion in the Republican donor ranks, and after this display, there's a lot of frustration. So the wallets may not be as open as they have been before. That said, I agree with you. I think the border is number one position for them, and I think those hearings on the border will be something that he does. He's talked about it. And I think spending, on the big picture, I think Ukraine funding, for all that is said, is going to be on the table for debate. And that's a lot of the 20 here. That's what they want to talk about.
Last question, Bret Baier. Last night you brought up Joe Biden is going to the border. My answer to you was that's because he has to. Why do you think he's doing it?
Well, I think he does have to. When you have Gavin Newsom going to the border saying we as a party need to take this seriously, and you have other Democrats raising alarm bells, I think that is something he has to do. It's also getting untenable down there. You're losing whole cities to an influx that has to be stopped. And, I think the Title 42 thing is one aspect of it, but the other part is this attack that we're taking from fentanyl. I mean, it is an attack on our nation. And for him to just get it with a speech today and a visit next week, a little late, but they know how important political.
That's interesting, Brett. I hadn't thought about it in those terms before. Whenever there's a disaster in the United States, the president shows up. Whether it's Sandy Hook, whether it is Hurricane Katrina or Ian, they always show. There's a disaster at the border. You're absolutely right. He's doing disaster comforting when he goes down there. But the question will arise why he hadn't been there before. And do you think he'll have to go more than once?
I think it'll be, one time, shows his face, and then they try to do some executive actions. Cuellar suggested to me last week before, that there were some things in the works that they thought that they could change executive action-wise. I don't know why they haven't done it up until now. I think that the political onus before the election was that it was such a bad issue for them that they just ignored it, and it's not ignorable anymore.
Bret Baier, we're going to be watching tonight. You've started a new podcast, by the way, which was news to me last night on the set. Where do people find that?
Yeah, so foxnewspodcast.com, or actually wherever you download podcasts, Spotify, wherever. And it's called the Bret Baier Podcast. And under there, you can find Common Ground, which is the left and right or different perspectives, and also the All-Star Panel Podcast. So both of those are in one spot.
Bret Baier, always good to talk to you, my friend. Thank you. And go Buckeyes. We'll get you next time.
All right. I didn't even mention it, you.
I know. You are the gentleman's gentleman on television. People ask me why I do special report because he doesn't gig me. When I'm already bleeding, he doesn't come step on the wound. Thank you. Thank you, Bret Baier.